what exactly is the whole regulation and extension of deadline all about? Michael Ango is here. He's an associate director in charge of tax advisory and regulation at Anderson Tax Nigeria. Is trying to unpack this entire issue. Give us some clarity. Good morning.
Yeah, morning, Boston.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank
you for coming. Yeah. Give us some clarity on this NITDA data reporting audit.
All right.
What's this all about?
So let's step back a bit, Boston. Nigeria is Africa's largest economy. We're a major player in the global economy. Technology is beginning to play a bigger role in terms of business, everyday business. You know, technology is present, big data and AI and all of that. So NITDA's role as a regulator in the IT sector is essentially to ensure that, you know, we have best practices, best global practices in our own, you know, day-to-day affairs. So NITDA introduced a regulation called the Nigerian Data Protection Regulations in January 2019, modeled after the EU GDPR, of course, which our viewers might be familiar with. So essentially what NITDA is saying is that, look, we need to protect personal data in Nigeria. In the last few years, you've heard about people saying, you know, their data has been misused. Data is asset anyway. Data is assets to businesses.
So data is the new oil.
Yes, in fact, I said, you know, I have
Facebook, Google.
Yes, Facebook, Google. You know, so essentially, what NITDA is saying is, look, we need to do things properly. We're an increasingly important member of the global economy. We need to make sure that we have the best global practice again, so that our businesses can be competitive. You know, investors can feel free to come into our economy, share their data with us. Our businesses. Nigerian banks are listed on the New York Stock Exchange, Joburg, and London Stock Exchange. So we need to also begin to ensure that we're doing things properly at home. So that's really the, you know, the kind of background to it.
Who are those targeted by NITDA here?
Oh, well, when you say targeted, I'll say that who does NITDA seek to protect? NITDA seeks to protect you and I. It seeks to protect everyday Nigerians, people who walk into the banking hall and give their data, people who go to the telcos and register, people who transact business on the stock exchange, employees, you know, channel employees, Anderson employees. So it's personal data. That's the focus of the regulations. But in terms of who is being regulated here, the people who are being regulated are the data controllers. And the data controller is any entity that processes personal data. Yeah. So the like telcos? The telcos, of course, the banks, the capital market operators, and everyday employers, you know, multinationals and all of that. So those are the guys who need to, you know, up their game and ensure that they're doing things properly. And if you look at what has happened, the reality is that after the EU GDPR came out in 2018, a number of Nigerian companies who have EU parents and all that have actually brought in some level of compliance. So what we've seen really is that in terms of what NITDA is saying that everybody needs to move at the same pace and everybody needs to be at the same level. You can't be in an economy where, you know, you have certain sets of persons who are doing well and then certain companies who don't even have any form of data protection.
In layman's language, and breaking it down for clarity, what exactly is NITDA trying to do? Are they asking these data controller and processors to step forward, bring those data into their own data bank, or what?
No. So what is it is that you already have the data. I mean, data controllers collect data every day.
So banks, for example?
They have my data, they have yours, they have your number, they have your BVN, they have your biometrics in some instances. So what NITDA is saying is that we need to see a certain level of, you know, protection, of data protection. We need to see certain systems in place. We need to see certain processes. For example, something as basic as consent. You know, I don't know if when you went to give your BVN, your biometrics, your bank actually let you know, this is what I will intend to use your data for. You know, so there are things like consent, you know, transfer of data. If you're going to transfer someone's data from point A to B, if you're going to give it to a third party to process and all of that. So it's really saying that, look, it's time for Nigeria to begin to do things properly when it comes to processing data, collecting data, storage of data. You know, people collect data and then there's nothing like a data retention policy. If you go into the banks today, probably have accounts of persons who've long gone away, you know, and all of that. So NITDA is saying, look, we've introduced a set of regulations. It's not punitive. We're not intending to hold a big stick over anyone's head. We want to see voluntary compliance. And I think that's what informed the extension, because previously what's happened is that when the regulations were issued in January, there were certain deadlines which had passed. And NITDA felt, look, we probably haven't done enough in terms of publicity. So let's step back, give industry significant time to comply. And so they've given a 90-day extension to say, look, you need to put your books in order, after which, you know, we'll come in and do audits. And so there's even a provision in the regulations for a mandatory self-audit, which should have happened on the 25th of July. That was the deadline. So that's been moved back 90 days. So the mandatory self-audit is you are looking at your systems and saying to yourself, where am I? What am I doing? What's the level of compliance I have? And if there are remedial steps to take, then you begin to take remedial steps. So they've also said they would have what they call DPCOs, data protection compliance organizations. So they've appointed DPCOs and said to the DPCOs, you are going to be our interface with the data controllers, whether it's the banks, the telcos, the multinationals, and even government agencies. An interesting thing about this regulation is that it actually also ensures that government agencies, MDAs, comply with this regulation.
I was just about to point out the issue between banks, companies, and the tax authority, for the FIRS, for example.
Excellent.
In which the tax authorities tell banks,
yes,
so give me the data, I'm going to put a lien on
very
this customer's account for tax issues.
Yes.
And it's becoming very...
Okay, again, you must also understand that the regulations also have exceptions. So where there is a legal obligation under the law, under any of our laws, then of course, the banks will have to do what, for example, FIRS asks them to do.
Or NFIU.
Or NFIU, exactly. But the point simply is this. So if you're collecting a data from a data subject, what you must also let the data subject know is that, look, there are instances where I may have to give your data to a third party, for example, government, for example, FIRS, for example, EFCC or NFIU, if the certain requirements are met. So again, that is the whole idea of consent. Consent features heavily under this regulation.
You mean what we just talk about, the consent has to be there in bold print?
Oh, absolutely.
If I'm
absolutely, in fact, what
submitting data, if I'm filling my tax form, if I'm
yes,
reopening a bank account, whatever, it has to be there. So
yes,
it's explicitly stated.
Yes. So credit to NITDA. NITDA have set out a framework, a compliance framework, a very detailed document of about 50 pages. They've gone down to the details and said, look, they've even said to you how consent must be gotten. Consent must be specific, it must be unambiguous, and it must be for each specific purpose. So if I'm collecting your data because I need to pay you employee salaries, I must let you know that's why I'm collecting your data. If I'm collecting your data because you're going in for a recruitment or for promotion or something of that nature, I must also inform you. So it's very detailed. And for me, honestly, it's a novel one. And we're not too far behind the EU in this regard. I mean, the GDPR came out in mid-2018. By January, Nigeria had issued its own NDPR. So we must give kudos to NITDA in that regard. And what must then happen is that NITDA must then do more in terms of letting people know what's happening. And, they must do more in terms of letting the organizations know this is why and how you need to comply. NITDA have said severally, look, the fines are significant, I must tell you, for breach. I mean,
but you said it's not punitive.
Yeah,
it's just when everybody
but again,
it's a bit of a moral solution.
Yeah,
there's a bit of a stick at the end of the carrot.
Absolutely, because if you don't have the stick, then how do you get people to comply? There will always be, outliers, people who would refuse to comply. So at the end of the day, there are significant fines of almost 2% of your annual gross revenue. If you have about 10,000 data subjects, 1% of your annual gross revenue. If you have, I think, 2,000 data subjects thereabout.
Do you think those
realistic fines?
Are they steep or just in order?
Oh, well, you see, I mean, if you look at Facebook, the Facebook fine was $5 billion US. Yes, for the
That's a multi-billion-dollar company.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that just amounted to about 60 days of operating expenses and less than 1% of the company's capitalization.
It looks like a big money. But
it looks, yeah, of course, in relation to the size of Facebook, you may say it's little, but again, boss, who wants to throw away $5 billion US? It's money that Mark could have used to build.
A quarter of our budget?
Yeah, a quarter of yeah, putting it that way, yeah. So, but again, the thing is this, NITDA is saying to themselves or to us that, look, I'm not here to punish you. The fines are not what is at the top of our minds, but if need be, we will impose those fines. But let me tell you something even more interesting. There's also criminal consequence. So you can actually be prosecuted for data breach. It's easy. It can also, it can also be a criminal offense. So, I mean, principal officers, MDs, the executives, the EDs, and all of that of a company that commits such an egregious breach of data might be prosecuted. And who wants to go to prison for something that is avoidable? So there are different levels. But for now, what NITDA is saying is let's do it voluntarily. They've gotten the DPCOs in, they've registered them, and they said to them, look, go out there, work with these companies, ensure that we've gotten to a certain stage of compliance. And then by March 2020, there would be an audit by NITDA where they then will check the level of compliance of the data controllers.
Mm. Okay, so in your view, someone who's an industry practitioner, what's the discussion amongst you practitioners about this NITDA's latest move?
Well, for me, all I've had is commendation. I mean, amongst ourselves, everyone is happy that this has happened because, again, it's something that the conversations have been taking place for some time, and people are saying, look, it's about time Nigeria begins to put its books, its laws in order. We haven't quite we don't have a specific data protection law, so this regulation is really the best thing for now. NITDA have said going forward at some point in time, they may then, codify the regulations, put them in a specific legislation. But all I've heard from industry and even the data controllers, the companies, the multinationals, they are receptive to it. It's a bit of an inconvenience again because, you have to tweak some of your systems depending on your level of compliance. But the reality is that I have had little or no resistance to it. There may be some latent resistance, but most people realize...
But why would it be difficult to draft a data law?
Well, Boston, you and I know better. If you draft a law today, I mean, it might take forever to get to the National Assembly and then to get consent and all of that. I mean...
Whose job is it to actually draft a data law? Well, I think that will be fall under the Ministry of...
yeah, well, it could be anybody. It could come as a private member bill. It could come...
the National Assembly.
It could come as a private member bill. It could come from the executive. It could come from NITDA or even the Ministry of Communications.
Even Ministry of Justice.
Oh, yeah, of course, even Ministry of Justice. And thankfully, during the Senate hearings, one of the questions that was asked the former Attorney General was, look, what do you intend to do to ensure that going forward, laws don't go through the whole legislative process and then get to the last stage and then they don't get assented to the president. So I'm sure NITDA would handle all of that, going forward, because they also understand that there's also necessity to ensure that we have something very specific, statutory in our books, and it's constitutional, boss, and the Constitution guarantees your right to privacy. So, I mean, everyone should also be interested in knowing how your data is handled. I remember one of the jokes that, people on Twitter will, say, oh, if you're Michael Ango and you wrote WAEC in 1998, your WAEC mass paper is with Mama ERBG who's selling Akara. It's data breach.
How did it get there?
I don't know. These things happen, but I'm sure you see that, might be walking on the street and then you see a piece of paper, you see someone's bank slip, you see someone's pay slip. These things happen and all of that. I mean, the BA fine was basically 183 million pounds, was basically breach of passenger data, credit card details and all that. Yeah, so people need to ensure that, when you handle someone's data, like I said, data is asset. You don't misuse your assets. You don't misuse your cars. You don't misuse your mobile phones. You don't misuse your laptops. So why do you misuse data? Data is very important. My data is important to me. It's important to you. It's what is used to identify you. How would you like your BVN to be all up there everywhere?
I'm concerned a little bit about how this will apply to big government institutions.
Yes.
And how they will comply for big government agencies such as INEC, for example.
Absolutely.
Because INEC has millions
87 million registered voters thereabouts.
That's a whole lot of data sitting there. You have the NIMC as well.
Yes.
Information
FIRS. You have the CBN. You have the,
So for those ones, how do we ensure that their staffers, for example, the NIMC, for example, don't misuse or play with this data?
Very good. So one of the things that NITDA is also putting forward is education, information, and training is a very key issue under the NDPR. In fact, one of the functions of the DPCOs, that's the Data Protection Compliance Organizations, is training. So every organization that qualifies as a data controller is required to employ or engage a DPCO. And so it's the role of your DPCO to actually ensure that your staff are trained from the top management down to the lowest staff, because everybody needs to understand. You might have a multi-billion-dollar business, you might have NIMC where everyone, at the top management, the EDs and everyone, they all understand what they do. But if your cleaners don't understand what they do, or your clerks don't understand what to do when it comes to data protection, and they misuse data, or they are the source of a data breach, then of course the entire organization...
So there's a data fraud.
Yes, or there's a data fraud example, So it's important. Training, like I said, is going to be a very key component of the NDPR. In fairness to NITDA, again, they've had series of stakeholder forums. We had one last week in Abuja. There was one the week before that in Lagos. And there's constant engagement. So NITDA is saying, look, the DPCOs, you guys need to go out there and also make sure that, people know about this. For the government agencies, what I suspect will happen is that at some point in time, NITDA would have to organize some form of, whether it's a, enlightenment forum or some form of, training and all of that, I think for the key government agencies. But having said that, even the DPCOs will have a big role to play in terms of ensuring that agencies like INEC, NIMC, FIRS, and all of that, who hold big data, very, very sensitive data also.
Yeah, very sensitive data.
Yeah, very
because
sensitive
when you go to election tribunal,
yes.
What have you?
Yeah.
Bags of Ghana must go bags
who knows what happens after the tribunal?
Of voters' information, and I say, okay. So what happens to these bags of?
I don't know. I wish I did.
Of papers that are dumped at various states and whatever tribunals. So where did they get this data?
And there's a principle called data minimization under the NDPR. Data minimization simply means the less the better. So, Boston, if I don't need your biometrics, why do I need to collect your biometrics? So, under the regulations, again, NITDA said, look, just collect what you need. The lesser, the better, because the more data you have, then the higher the chances that it gets misused, and the higher the impact if there's a breach or, there's a theft or misuse and all of that. So it's an interesting piece of legislation.
Looking at banks and others in Europe, in UK and elsewhere with data breach and it's
it's a major issue.
It's a major. Millions of
I mean, there's a SEC fine that just came out yesterday again for Google. I mean, it's for Facebook. It's $100 million. So it seems small, but I mean, like I said, no one likes to give away money. Facebook is not
with Facebook, you want everybody in the world to be on your platform.
Yes.
There's so much, about 7 billion people. Data flying around. I think it's a new world, and it's good that Nigeria is stepping into
it's a commendable one. And for us, as consultants, we also want to make sure that our clients don't fall foul of the laws. We also want to help our clients ensure that they do things properly. And NITDA is very supportive. Over the next 90 days, you will see increased activities, you see increased conversations, and of course increased compliance. A number of companies have complied, in fairness to them. Some of the multinationals and even some of the local Nigerian companies.
No, you don't want to get $5 billion slapped on you, or $100 million in a Nigerian environment. That's a whole pile of cash.
That's a whole pile of cash.
Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It's good to have you here, clarifying this very important piece of information that perhaps not making the headlines in the midst of so many others. Michael Ango, who is an associate director in charge of tax regulation and all that at Anderson Tax Nigeria. Let's change tack back to the marketplace when we come back.